button and get that rolling for us. Rebecca, did that start for you, the recording? Did. Fantastic. Thank you. Okay, so now that we've gotten that out of the way, to begin our conversation, I will read Columbia Land Conservancy's land acknowledgement. We humbly and gratefully acknowledge that Columbia County, New York, is predominantly on the ancestral lands of the Stockbridge-Munsee Band of Mohicans, who are the indigenous people of this land. They were subject to genocide, coerced into assimilation, and forcibly removed from their homelands to what is now known as Wisconsin. They continue to retain their unbroken status as a sovereign Native nation, and despite removal, they continue to hold relationships with their homelands and settler communities. As a land trust and one of the many stewards of this place, CLC understands that access to land is a sacred and collective right. CLC recognizes the Indigenous history of this land and honors ancestors past and present, and supports current efforts to build more equitable spaces for all the human and non-human relatives who call this place home. It's now my pleasure to introduce the evening speakers, Heidi Bock and Ben Nickley. Heidi Bock is the Vice President of Conservation at CLC, overseeing the organization's conservation efforts as outlined in the strategic plan. She manages land protection and stewardship initiatives, connects communities to public lands, and helps coordinate educational programs and resources to empower residents to care for their own land. Ben Nickley is a scientist with a passion for birds and the ecosystems they are an integral part of. Always fascinated by nature, he got his start in science at Ohio State University, where his research was recognized with an award at the Denman Undergraduate Research Forum. Since then, Ben has traveled across North America pursuing avian field studies for nonprofits, universities, and state governments, picking up his master's in biology along the way. He is the author of several peer-reviewed articles and has presented his work at international conferences. Helping others connect with the natural world through birds is his forte and his mission. His role as executive director is to oversee the day-to-day operations of the Berkshire Bird Observatory and steer its development. Ben feels privileged to have landed in the Berkshires and could not think of a better place to do the work he loves. With that, it is my pleasure to get the conversation started and pass the mic to Heidi to discuss all things land management and bird conservation.
Thank you, Mallory. I'm going to share my screen. And how does that look? Are you seeing the? Awesome. Thank you. So I will, just want to welcome everybody again and thank you all for joining us. And I'm really excited to share more about Columbia Land Conservancy's work and specifically about our partnership with the Berkshire Bird Observatory and how this work is really guiding some of our management at some of our public lands. So to get started, let's see, there we go. So for a little bit of overview, I saw a lot of familiar names and faces, which I'm really happy to see you all here. But for those of you who might not be familiar with the Columbia Land Conservancy, I thought I would start out the presentation with a brief overview of the work that we do throughout the county and then zoom in specifically to UMS and then pass over to Ben to talk about the conservation work of the birds that we're partnering on. So we are a nonprofit land trust that focuses our work primarily on Columbia County, and our mission is to bring people together to conserve, appreciate, and enjoy land. And we are approaching our 40th anniversary next year, which we're really excited about. And so please keep an eye out and look for some really great activities and opportunities to get together on the land next year. We're excited for a party. And as Mallory mentioned, the conservation work that we're doing right now is guided by a strategic plan. And the way in which we're accomplishing that work is through these three pillars that are conserve, connect, and care. And so just to kick it off, the map that you see on the screen is our protected lands map, which shows The dark green areas are the areas that we protected with private conservation easements, and the dark orange are lands that we own and are open to the public. And to date, we've conserved nearly 40,000 acres of land. And as you may have heard, over the last year or so, we've been working on a plan to conserve Columbia County. And that initiative will give us a better understanding of where the critical landscapes are in the county that support many of the species, such as grassland birds. And we'll be focusing our efforts and conservation outreach in those areas. And we'll continue to protect land in the county, but not every property is in need of permanent protection, and it might not be the best tool for it. So there are many opportunities for landowners and land managers to contribute to the conservation efforts and the successes in Columbia County. The next area that we are working in is Connect. And I think many people on this call and that we work with in the county, our first encounter with CLC is through our public lands and the education programs, which are our most visible aspects of our work. And we own 10 properties that are open to the public currently. We've got a couple more coming up in the next year or so that will be open, and you'll hear more about those. But these 10 open properties are throughout the county and each have a diverse set of conservation values and unique features that influence the management and recreational opportunities that they provide. These properties are open year-round, dawn till dusk at no cost, and have a varying level of accessibility, including over a mile of all-access trail at our Greenport property. And as many of you may know, the opportunities are also wide-ranging, including hiking, fishing, paddling, bird watching, guided walks and workshops, along with our very engaging interpretive signage throughout the sites to help visitors connect to the land when somebody from CLC can't be there with them. And then the final pillar of the work that we're doing out of our strategic plan is care. And our goal with many of the public lands is to model sound management techniques, to share with others, to help make good decisions on their properties. And one of the ways that we have done that in the last couple of years is our land camp series. And we'll be doing that again this coming year. But the goal with that and the tagline is to learn, try, and DIY. And so these workshops are ways for the public to come and learn about the work that we're doing, as well as get their hands dirty and help us with some of the habitat management projects, and then take those skills that they're learning and go back home or to a property that they're managing and put those into practice. And so this coming year, we'll be creating a network of landowners interested in applying these conservation practices and to help share out to others who are interested in learning. Another aspect of care is our volunteer program. And volunteers play a critical role in the work that we do in caring for our lands that are open to the public. They help us maintain trails, support habitat restoration projects, and help us collect community science data. And we'll share more about how you can get involved in our volunteer program at the end of the presentation. So now that's our high level, what we do. We'll zoom in to UMS, which, as you can see here on the slightly zoomed in version of the protected lands map, UMS is in the north central part of the county and is named for the UMS family, a prominent dairy farm family in Chatham who owned and farmed this property and nearby land from about the early 1950s, and they're still farming today in the area. In 2001, the Open Space Institute, OSI, and CLC worked with the UMS family to purchase the 180-acre property. And with support from grants and foundations, including the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, purchased the property to be perpetually protected as an important wildlife area. So zooming in a little more, you can see UMS here, the outline in the black outline. And the property has a variety of habitats, including the 35-acre Sutherland Pond, 25 acres of woodlands, wet meadows and streams, and then 120 acres of open fields. And this mosaic of habitats provides shelter and nesting and foraging areas for many species, including grassland birds that are declining or rare in the Hudson Valley. So fast forward a couple of years to 2004, and UMS was open to the public with trails and opportunities to get out onto Sutherland Pond. And the Open Space Institute owned the property at that point, and CLC managed it with a management agreement. And the primary purposes were for recreation, education, and wildlife habitat. And then in 2013, OSI transferred the property to CLC with subject to an easement. So it's sort of doubly protected through its the conservation. And then since its opening in 2004, UMS has become one of our most beloved recreational destinations for visitors who particularly enjoy the open meadow landscape and the pond. So next, we'll talk a little bit about the current management. And so the map that's shown here is our rotational mowing schedule. And when CLC began managing the property, in order to restore the fields to viable grassland bird habitat, we took on a mowing regime that was following the best management practices developed by New York, Massachusetts, and Vermont Audubon. And this involves a recommendation for a delayed cutting after August 15th. And that enables the birds to have completely left their nests, and grassland birds are ground nesting birds, which I'll let Ben talk much more about. And so the way in which we mow the fields, as you can see here, the field in blue was mowed this year, and the red and yellow ones will be mowed on a cyclical rotation. And the idea for that is that it prevents early successional shrubby vegetation and woody vegetation for coming into the fields if they're mowed on a rotational basis. And specifically this type of management is important for grassland birds, in particular in the Northeast, because they depend on human-altered landscapes, because if left to their own devices, these fields would turn into woods. And so we need to actively manage them in order for it to maintain a grassland habitat. And then in last year, in 2024, we began a partnership with Dogwood Farms, who is a neighboring farm to the south. And that area in the sort of tealy green, we did some restoration, removing big shrubs, multiflora rose, Turingo crab, mechanically removing those, and are integrating grazing into those fields to hopefully reestablish those as grassland bird habitat in the future. And speaking of future, what we're hoping for, and this is a picture of some of Dogwood Farms cattle, but we've noticed in recent years that more woody vegetation is coming in more quickly. And so we're going to be assessing the fields for the grass composition. And while we'll continue to maintain our bird-focused mowing schedule as of right now, there's more research coming out on the use of intentional rotational grazing for grassland bird habitat management, specifically in the Northeast. And so we want to incorporate more grazing in partnership with Dogwood Farm, and then also look at, are there other rehabilitation that we could do on the fields, including warm season grasses, and other elements that scientists are coming out with. So our hope, like I said earlier, with our public lands is to use these as demonstration sites and to create a replicable conservation model for other properties that we own, like Overmountain, but also for landowners and land managers to implement across Columbia County and across the region. And so, knowing that managing for grassland birds is very specific type of management and may be limiting other species that can use the site, but we can manage other properties for those other species or other parts of UMS, for instance, for other species. And so our hope with the grassland bird management is that we're looking to develop management practices that support the diverse grassland ecosystem and specifically on working lands to help both the birds and local farmers and the local food systems. And we can't do that without partnerships. And over the years, we've partnered with groups like the Allen DeVoe Bird Club to collect data on things like our bluebird boxes and collecting eBird lists, as well as guiding bird programs such as the Great Backyard Bird Count. And then in 2024, we partnered with the Berkshire Bird Observatory to set up kestrel boxes. And then this past year, we partnered with them on a bird banding project. And one of the key features of UMS in particular is this grassland habitat. And the successful management of it really is achieved through these strong partnerships with farmers, conservation scientists, and the community. And so, we know we can't do it all on our own, and we rely on the different expertise of all of our partners and volunteers to collaborate on projects and to learn from each other. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ben.
Okay, thanks, Heidi. Thanks, Mallory. And thank you all for being here to join us for this conversation about what's going on at UMS. I'm going to figure out how to share my screen really quick, so just give me a second. Okay. So is that good? Okay. Right. So Heidi did a wonderful job discussing what Columbia Land Conservancy is about and what they're up to in terms of their objectives for their various lands in the county. I'm going to just focus on our partnership that we have with CLC at UMS to focus on the grassland bird habitat that is there. So this is a picture of UMS. It's got this wonderful pond. And as Heidi showed you guys earlier, about 120 acres of open grassland that's managed in a rotational sort of way to maintain that open component and so that woody vegetation doesn't sort of encroach. For anyone who's walked around UMS, I mean, it's a beautiful property. I would encourage all of you to get out there and check it out any time of the year. But during the spring and summer months, it's just full of birds. Birds that are using the pond, that are using the hedgerows, and certainly birds that are using the open fields as well, including a number of grassland bird species that are considered very uncommon, especially as breeding birds in the eastern United States in general, and then specifically in New York State, Columbia County. So I was aware of UMS because of the bird diversity there, and in particular because of the birds that depend on grassland habitat that were documented as breeders there, birds that spend the summer there. And so I reached out to Heidi and Columbia Land Conservancy about one of our projects to help one of these grassland breeding birds, the American kestrel. And we got started with them, but then we also wanted to work together to try to understand the entire breeding bird community at UMS, and how management can be used as a tool to help support those birds. I'm Ben Nickley. I guess I should sort of tell you a little bit about what we do, Berkshire Bird Observatory. We're a conservation nonprofit organization. So we collect data. We have a number of different projects. All of our projects are collaborations, often with other nonprofits like Columbia Land Conservancy, local, regional nonprofits, and even some of the bigger international nonprofits. And I'll talk more about how these partnerships sort of fit together for this property at UMS. But we do it. We do a lot of different things. It's not just science and data for us. It's definitely partnerships. We depend on them, and we maximize the impact of our work by partnering with various organizations. But then also education and engagement is central to everything that we do. So I'll be talking about a couple of those things as we move along here. So Heidi already showed you a map of the UMS property from a bird's eye view. It's got grassland, it's got the big Sutherland Pond, hedgerows, and woodland. So all of these different cover type components of the landscape are important for wildlife. And for birds in particular, in the breeding season, different species of birds associate with these different kinds of cover types. So having this mosaic landscape can support really great diversity of breeding birds at UMS, but we're going to focus on the grassland birds. So here's another picture of the grassland sort of area within UMS, grasses and forbs and a little bit of the woody shrubs you can see in there. But this is the guy we're kind of looking for, an eastern meadowlark. So this is a really cool grassland bird species that is one of these species that is considered area sensitive. So what that means is during the breeding season, eastern meadowlarks need a minimum contiguous amount of grassland habitat in order to successfully breed, to settle and successfully rear young. And for this bird that's experienced steep declines, they need big open grassland, about 40 acres of grassland for a successful breeding attempt for a pair of these birds. So that's a lot. They need these big open landscapes, and UMS has it with 120 acres of open grassland. We caught that bird at UMS in one of our banding sessions, which I'll talk more about methods, but we had to bring it up by the Meadowlark Trail sign because that's right where we caught them, just next to the sign. So not misnamed there. Really cool to have them. So I just want to put this into context on the broader landscape scale. In North America, our grasslands historically have been concentrated in the Great Plains states. So this figure I took from Fish and Wildlife, but it just shows the extent of the loss of grassland over time within the Great Plains. We've lost over 60% of our grasslands. So we're thinking tall grass prairie, short grass prairie, and a lot of that has been converted to intensive agriculture. So the landscape remains open. If anyone's driven through those flyover states, it's very open. There's not a whole lot of trees, but it's intense agriculture, which has a whole host of problems and is not nearly the same as like a functioning grassland ecosystem. So tons of loss of the actual biome, and that's had huge cascading consequences for wildlife from a number of different taxonomic groups, certainly including grassland bird species. So yes, this is from the Sierra Club. Our grassland birds are disappearing. I love this painting from Sarah Gilman there, showing the grassland bird, and in the wing there's sort of this windowed view of what a diverse grassland, the native biome actually looks like, and then to juxtapose that against the background there with this intensive agriculture mosaic, they're two very, very different things there. So when you convert a biome into just like an agricultural landscape, it's going to have some big impacts, and we're seeing that certainly with our grassland birds. I love this graph here. I'll explain it briefly, but this is from Harvard Forest. And it's for Massachusetts, but New York State, very similar sort of trajectory. So early on, pre-settlement times, on the left side of the graph, if you go back in time along that x-axis, you see that forest was all over the place in Massachusetts for this graph. And we had some really like amazing big predators, wolves, mountain lions were all abundant. We had passenger pigeons, which are now extinct. And then as European colonization sort of moved from east to west across the landscape, clearing forest, opening pasture, opening fields, um, our forests started to decline, and then grasslands and pastures and hayfields and meadows sort of opened up, and then we had this big uptick in grassland birds like bobolinks and meadowlarks. But then, sort of post like late 19th century, farms started to not fare as well. Rocky soil in New England, a lot of the farming moved to the Great Plains states, and in the Northeast, farming declined, and a lot of those forests were, or those farms were reclaimed by forest, and so we had a decrease in our grassland sort of habitat in the late 19th century, carrying on into present day with reforestation, and so you get like more beaver and more deer coming back, but the grassland birds, their numbers in our region, Massachusetts, for this graph, really declined. And that's important because what I've shown you with the intensification of agriculture in the Great Plains states, that's caused a massive decline in birds that are native to that region in great abundance. And we've lost so many of our breeding birds in North America, 3 billion birds. That's not just grassland birds, that's across the board, are gone from the last 50 or so years. So really alarming. And if you look at this figure, this is from Cornell and Audubon. Um, Among these different groups of birds in terms of like guild habitat association, grassland birds have been hit by far the hardest, with over 50% of our grassland birds gone from the landscape. So grasslands are really important, and our regions in the Northeast that are open and that do have a legacy of farming, like the Ooms property, these areas have great potential to provide crucial support for these birds that have been hit hardest of all of our breeding birds in North America. So it's a unique opportunity. But in order to figure out how these landscapes can provide for these birds, you need to first understand what's there, that's inventory, and then monitor the populations to see how management can work in tandem with these conservation goals. And so that's sort of where we come in with our part of this partnership at OOMS. So we're Berkshire Bird Observatory. One of the things that we do in Massachusetts and now with Columbia Land Conservancy in New York State is we participate in this huge collaborative project to study breeding birds and to understand their population dynamics in collaboration with the Institute for Bird Populations, which is a wonderful nonprofit scientific organization that's been doing this program since the 1980s. And so this is the bird banding. This is what we did for our first season at OOMS this year. We participated in this project. And so we initiated a MAPS bird banding station following these very strict protocols developed by the Institute for Bird Populations and operated a station along with hundreds of other stations that go across the continent to participate in this. And I'll just say that operators of MAP stations have been contributing really important data to this program for decades. That's led to millions of birds being banded. Really important data and records from that, and has led to hundreds of scientific publications, which are really important for understanding these population trends and trajectories, and also for providing management recommendations, which are really important. So we're part of this really cool collaboration. And so what it's about is estimating these pillars of demography, these vital rates that determine population dynamics. So that's productivity and survivorship. Productivity, how many young of the year are being produced, how many baby birds, right, within a season, within a year, and then also adult survivorship from year to year to year. So those two things can tell you a lot about how a population is doing. So here's just a map of these bird banding stations that participate in this program. You can see very widespread. And if you zoom in here, that star is UMS. So that's where we've established this station. And so for this project, it's a capture, mark, recapture study. So it involves capturing wild birds, banding them with a very lightweight aluminum band, which just has a unique 9-digit number on it, and then releasing the birds. And we do this systematically across the breeding season. How do we catch the birds? We catch them in mist nets. So these big nets that are about 10 feet tall and about 36 feet long. The location of our net placement is shown on this map with all of these points approximating where we set up the nets. So you can see that we're focused on this open grassland field in the northeast section of the property, sampling the grassland primarily, but then also some of those key edge habitats, which are so important for birds during the breeding season and also during post-breeding dispersal, including this hedgerow sort of in the middle here, and then this woodland also in the northeast corner of the parcel. So here's a mist net. If you were curious about what our traps look like, you can barely see it. And there's a reason for that. If you can see it, the birds can see it. So these nets are almost transparent. They kind of look like four badminton nets stitched together. But the birds, as they're flying around, going about their business and foraging, if they don't notice the net, they'll fly into it, and the net will sort of expand out and cradle them in a sort of a hammock situation. And then they kind of sit in there, and we go around and systematically check these nets every 30 to 40 minutes, depending on condition, and with skilled, trained, and caring hands, extract the birds and bring them back to our banding station to collect our data. So we do this under permits from the federal government and from the state of New York. So this is all very highly regulated and a well-established and very safe method for studying bird populations. So we know what we're doing. So here's me extracting a bird just to kind of give you an idea of what this looks like. I believe that's a red-winged blackbird that's sitting in the pocket of one of our nets. So we go around and take these birds out. We put them in these cute little bird bags that our volunteers sewed for us. And the birds, when they go in the bags, they're very calm. If anyone is familiar with like falconry, falconers will put a little hood on their falcons, which just blocks the eyesight of the bird, and the birds just calm right down when that happens. It's a similar sort of thing for us with the bird bags. So it's a cozy place for the birds to rest while they're waiting for us to, collect our data. And so that's the best place for them. So we bring them back, we sort them on our little clips based on their size, and then we have our field station set up and we collect our data. So here's me taking a baby robin out of one of our bird bags here. And we get going with our banding process, which for each bird takes only a matter of like 30 seconds to a minute, depending on how much blabbing I'm doing, if we have visitors, if I'm telling them about the life history of the bird. But it's very fast and very efficient. So we slap a band on the bird and then we collect data in a number of different areas. We also get to look at these amazing birds up close, and we love to share this with visitors. We had many visitors to the banding station at UMS this summer, and so engaging people with the science and with the birds was a big part of what we did, and we love doing that. This baby robin actually had a berry in its mouth that it had pulled from the hedgerow, and it was still like working on swallowing that down while we had it. It did eventually get it down, which was funny to see it. But the babies, it's amazing to see these birds in this plumage that they only wear for like, a week or a couple of weeks. And often when we get young birds in the hand, they will like beg food from us. So they're not scared of us. They're still very like confused, and they see something bigger than them that comes close to their beak and they'll open it up and ask for more food, whether or not they have a berry already lodged in there. So that's what was going on with that robin. But I just want to show you some of the diversity of the birds that we're sampling at UM. So American robin, that was a baby one. Here's some other berry eaters. We've got a cedar waxwing there on the left, and then a gray catbird, it looks like, on the right. Here's a common grackle. So we can pull out the wing and look at characteristics of the feathers, the molts, the plumage, in order to age these birds and to put them into one of a handful of age classes, which is really important for population demography. So by having these birds in the hand, it allows us to capture, mark, put the band on, and recapture, which is vital for this kind of a population study, but then also get information on the sex of the bird and the age of the bird, which we wouldn't otherwise be able to do. So we also collect data on body condition and fat, molt, and feather replacement. So that's what I'm doing there is looking at the molt of the bird, the feathers that it's bringing in, and also checking for fat by blowing some of those feathers apart. We measure the birds in standardized ways to look at the size of the bird, and with these other data points, we can get an idea of their body condition, how well they're doing. So this was Laudine, one of our interns for the spring that helped me out a little bit in the summer before heading back to France, actually, where she's from. So here we're weighing the bird, which is the last thing we do before we let him go. And you can see the band there on the bird's leg, which is very lightweight aluminum, less than 1/10 of a gram. Here's a couple of really dazzling birds that are actually quite common in the edge habitat at UMS, a yellow warbler on the left and a blue-winged warbler on the right. So both birds that breed on the property. Here's a really cool comparison of some really funky birds. This is a common grackle again. On the left is the adult showing off his beautiful iridescent plumage and these really funky pale irises there coming right at you, and a beautifully shaped diamond shaped tail there. And then the baby on the right. So sometimes it's quite easy to put these birds into their respective age class, and sometimes it takes some sleuthing. But for these ones, it was very obvious, and it was actually the first common grackle that I've ever seen in full-on juvenile plumage like that on the right. So special for us, and special to share this too with birders. A real challenge for the babies is actually not if they're a baby or not, but what species is it? Because they look so very different than the adults, and they only look that way for a very brief window of time. And often it's not in any of the field guides, right? Like what the babies look like in their juvenile plumage. Bluebirds are certainly common. This is Maya, another intern who came back as a volunteer to help me out. I'm very grateful to Maya for that. We also caught some forest birds. So we had some nets in the hedgerows and in the woodland area. This is a yellow bellied sapsucker, beautiful adult male. Scarlet tanager, which we were very surprised when we caught this bird in one of our open field nets, post-breeding, dispersing female, finding something in the grassland. This is a core interior forest neotropical migratory bird. Like to get it in the middle of the grassland was noteworthy and very interesting. So you learn a lot about habitat use and what birds are doing and how that changes across the breeding season with this method too. So that's really interesting for us as well. Here's a red-eyed vireo, another forest bird. This one we caught in our forest net. Here's another interesting thing we documented. This is a Swainson's thrush that we caught during the breeding season, but it does not breed locally. The only place that these birds breed within the vicinity of Columbia County is really in the Catskills at the very tops of the mountains in the spruce fir forest up there. So this bird likely locally dispersed from the Catskills into our area still during the breeding season, probably skipped a breeding attempt and started migration early. So that was a really cool record to document that. Probably a regionally local early migrant. come into UMS for the wonderful stopover habitat. But here's the main sort of focus of the work was to try to figure out what are the grassland birds that are breeding here, how many of them are there, get some idea of the abundance, what is the age structure of the populations, and then over time to monitor those populations. And so we did get a meadowlark, and we actually caught this bird, I believe, 3 times. So we got to document he survived, right, throughout the breeding season. And this bird was a male in breeding. We could see he had breeding characteristics, so we know that there was at least an attempted breeding, a breeding attempt for this particular bird, and that he survived throughout the season. So really cool. He might have been one of maybe only 2 meadowlarks in that field that we were sampling, right? Because remember, this bird needs 40 acres of open grassland, and we sampled him. We got him. For us, it was thrilling to be able to hold this really extraordinary bird. Had to get a picture at the sign at the front of Booms there, because that's what it's all about. Managing those fields to provide a refuge for these birds that are becoming increasingly scarce, and really they need all the help they can get. We also caught some other really cool grassland and old field birds. On the left is a chipping sparrow with that beautiful pink beak. And on the right is a grasshopper sparrow, another bird that in Columbia County you would be very hard pressed to find as a breeder. So documenting these birds using the habitat. Grasshopper sparrows are also often overlooked. They can be quite secretive. So uh, it was really gratifying to be able to get this bird and to show that our sampling method is doing its job. Bobolinks too, which many of you will be familiar with at UMS, really by far the most abundant breeding grassland bird there. We did a pretty good job of sampling them as well. So these are both bobolinks. On the left is a male there with his really unique looking plumage with all that high contrast. And then on the right is a young bobolink. It could be a male or it could be a female, but it's showing just that cryptic sort of tawny brown sparrow color. Same species, really an amazing bird. So as we're doing the science, we're collecting the data. We also welcome groups, members of Columbia Land Conservancy and their friends, and some of our friends as well. College, recent college grads, college students, young scientists to come in and see these birds and see the science, and we can talk about what we're up to. So we love doing that. It was a big part of what we did there, and I hope that some of you that are here on this in on this conversation were able to make it out. But it was really a fun experience for everyone who participated. So here's just a little table of our dates. So we only did this about once a week over the course of the breeding season. So that's it. We got in 6 dates total. So we had 4 dates during the adult super period, and then 2 during the baby period at the end of the season, which is great and in line with what we needed to do to meet the maps, the protocol for this work. So here's the numbers. We were very busy. We captured in total 236 individuals from 33 species, so really great diversity, with only 8 recaptured birds, which in the first year of this project, that's not surprising that the numbers are low. If you did it in subsequent years, you'd expect those recap numbers to increase. And we had about 40 birds a day. So you can see on the left there with the table, gray catbird was very common in the hedgerows and the edge type habitats. We had a lot of those. A lot of birds that like edges, like robins, blackbirds, some old field birds, like goldfinches and common yellowthroats. And then we did pretty well with the bobolinks too, and some other species that we documented there. So the table just shows our top 10 sort of captured birds there. And here's how the age classes break down. So the bottom 3 age classes here are adult birds. So we had 112 adult birds versus 122 young. So that's looking at how productive these birds were in terms of breeding success. So that information all becomes much more useful as you go and continue the study from year to year. But we were able to age the vast majority of these birds accurately into their respective age classes. So that's what I want to say about this MAPS project. It was a lot of fun to do it, and a good year, a good pilot season, I'll say, for that. But another thing I wanted to get into, and Mallory, maybe you can let me know if I'm running kind of short on time.
Yes, I was just going to say I almost want to queue up the Kestrel boxes with my next question, my first question for everyone. So this has been fantastic. Ben and Heidi, thank you so much. We already have a few questions in the chat. Um, so I think what's top of mind for me is seeing the pictures of these birds, loving and maybe this is a call on other people, a thought on other people's minds is, how might other people get involved in this work, and how might we play a role in caring for special places like and caring for the special animals and birds that call these places home?
Yeah, that's a really important question. So uh, there's always something you can do, and I think it's really important, maybe more important now than ever, to feel empowered and to try to do what you can because we can all help. So for UMS specifically, CLC is doing a great job of managing it and trying to understand what's there and how best to manage it. But then also what's going to come out of this is some recommendations for landowners for things that they can bring back to their own lands, for what they can do and how to manage. I will just hit a few points right now of things that we know. Planting native plants is really important. Reducing the mowing frequency of at least certain parts of your yard, is really good too, to promote native plants and just natural sort of succession. So, like building pollinator habitat and things like that, that's really good. If you are a landowner with like a bigger chunk of land, or you're within a landscape matrix where there are other open kind of landscapes, there could be some specific management things that you could do that could really actually promote grassland birds, kestrels, even maybe on your property. Um, Another thing that everyone can do is, get out to these parcels that Columbia Land Conservancy manages and participate in these things. Meet other like-minded people, and I think we can all have more impact when we get together, and learn more about some of the conservation initiatives that are going on in our region, because we're all part of like the landscape matrix, at some level. So there's always something that folks can do.
Great. And Heidi, I want to give you a chance to chime in on that. Are there any additional ways that you might support that folks on the call kind of get involved, whether it's if they have 100 acres or if they live in an apartment, different ways that folks can get in on this work?
Yeah, I think I would echo what Ben has said. I think the work that um, both of our organizations are doing to share more about what's out on the landscape and just really better understand the species and the needs that they have is just a great way for um, to your point too, like if you don't own land, what can you do? And like volunteering with either of our organizations is a really amazing way to help impact the ecosystems that we do own and manage. And then you know smaller scale, like planting native pollinator habitat, provides the insects for the birds, that the food for the birds. So yeah, I think there's a lot of ways that through both the education programs and our volunteer opportunities for people to get involved. And as was mentioned, we're hoping that the research that we're doing with Ben and sort of some of the other research in the Northeast, that we can help share that out to other landowners and land managers to help guide some of this collective landscape management.
Thank you. We have one specific question from Marcella wondering, what are the best times of years to mow meadows to protect any birds that may be in them? If Ben and Heidi, if you have any advice about timing and the approach for mowing.
Yeah, so best practice for mowing is you want to reduce the frequency if you can. So a lot of people that have just like a yard, a lawn, they're mowing like every week or every other week. That's not gonna, I mean, that'll keep it open, but that's not really promoting native grasses or flowers, and certainly not going to work for insects or birds that might be around there. For grassland birds, a lot of these species that nest on the ground and need grassland need like bigger chunks of it, 10 plus acres as like sort of a minimum. So if you're thinking about grassland birds, you don't really need to worry too much about mowing unless you're one of these landowners or managers that is working with bigger parcels, bigger open areas. Now, if you happen to be one of those people or know someone who is farmer or someone with a hayfield or something, the recommendation is to mow once or twice a year. The first cut should be before the birds really settle in, so like late April or at the latest early May. And then you could do another cut after the birds have left, and so that you're thinking like early August or early to mid-August. And then, that's it. Or if you just mow once a year, for pollinators, let's say you have, just like a smaller parcel, an acre or even less, and you want to keep it nice and grassy for edge species of birds and pollinators and native plants. The best sort of recommendation is to just cut it once in spring after the first few warm days have come through, so like late April. And what that does is it allows for it to be maintained as an open area, but it also allows for the grass seeds and the flower seeds and everything that sort of happens late summer and early fall to provide important food resources for birds and insects and important habitat for overwintering insects. For that entire like winter period. So really like a spring cut is good, and you do it after things warm up because that allows hibernating insects to leave when the temperatures rise in late April. So that's best practice.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ben. We have another like more land management centered question that I think goes back to the moment in your presentation, Ben, where you were showing the decreases in grassland bird population. Someone asking that if humans decreased forest to create farmland and grassland, which were then allowed to revert back to forest, it seems they say the decrease of grassland birds would then just follow that progression, which is a return to normal. So, what do you say to that in terms of how you interpret that population change and what it means for land management and the care of birds?
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. I wanted to bring in that Harvard Forest graph and talk about the Great Plains a little bit to show some of the complexity around this and to give that perspective. Because it is really important as ecologists, like these are things we think about all the time. So yes, in the East and the Northeast, grasslands were never a big component of the pre-colonial landscape. And then they became a component of it, and now forests have returned to a lot of these areas as farms sort of started to shift more to the Great Plains and Midwest states. But those farms that now are often big, huge, like industrial farms in the Great Plains and Midwest, they're not going anywhere. And those grasslands that were a vital biome for so much wildlife, I mean, they've been greatly diminished. So my thought is, and many colleagues would agree on this, where there are opportunities to promote the grassland biome, the grassland habitat in the Northeast, do it because it can still have big impacts for species that are really rapidly declining and need the help. And they need it where they can get it. So you think about bobolinks, I mean, these birds are responsive. They move around, they fly 12,000 miles within a year during their migration. So they can respond and they can move and they can find habitat where it is. It doesn't have to be in maybe their original sort of native prairie plain state biome situation. It could be at a place like Ooms. Whereas Ooms, if you wanted to try to let it naturally go through the stages of plant succession back to forest, that process would take a very long time. We're talking decades and even centuries. And you also have a lot of problems with that in our region with invasives, encroachment of woody invasives. And Heidi could probably even talk about this more than me for what they have to deal with this at a lot of their properties, because there are a lot of invasive species that just they take over areas that are in earlier stages of succession. So it really seems like a great opportunity to help out some grassland species and pollinator species by sticking with the grassland.
Thank you, Ben. I know we're coming up to the edge of our time together. I want to do one more question to hear from both Heidi and Ben, somewhat quickly, and I appreciate you all being here tonight. And it's just to hear from both of you why you feel there's a need for this type of partnerships between land trusts and bird conservation organizations to just kind of make that implicit feeling we've all been kind of hearing about explicit. Why is this so important?
I can start. I think definitely from the land trust perspective and myself specifically, the work that we do in land conservation and land management is, we want it to, the land management in particular, we want it to be based in good science. And while there is good research, out there from the Northeast, when we learned about the Berkshire Bird Observatory and the opportunity to partner with Ben, it just really seemed like such a great opportunity to have this local expert helping us, providing these opportunities for the public to come out and learn from the work that he's doing. And I think it really, can help us, with the case for conservation on or land management on our properties. And then, just the opportunity to learn. It's just such a great way for our staff to learn more about what's going on. And yeah, I think that's.
Yeah, I would just add, it's a natural and good fit. So we didn't get to talk about kestrels because I blabbed too long about the songbird work, but for the kestrel project, it's like I'm familiar with some of the lands that CLC has, right? And I got in touch with Heidi and it's like, hey, you guys have great habitat for this declining grassland bird. If we just put a box up for it, you'd probably have them breeding there. And now we've seen that, and Columbia Land Conservancy has fledged, like a dozen kestrels in the last couple of years. And then also, so we're making those lands work harder for just having a better conservation sort of outcome, which is amazing. I mean, it's really a big deal. But then also we work that and we take the data, we're going to plug it into our own local analysis to see what kestrels need in our region and what their trends are, and then share that data with bigger nonprofits. So it's like now Columbia Land Conservancy is plugged in to this really important monitoring work. So it's like we've operationalized the land for science and really important collaborative projects. And then on the sort of connect and care side of things, we bring people out and we show them these birds and how amazing they are. And of course, me and my interns, I mean, we love doing this. It's what we really care about. But I think that leads to some really interesting programming opportunities for CLC. So it works really well, I think, both ways.
I see the demand, the want for Kestrel, more Kestrel in the chat. If folks are okay and Ben and Heidi are okay, if we could extend like another 5 minutes just so we could hear a little bit more from you, Ben, about the Kestrel boxes. And then we even have a question here. How might someone go about getting Kestrel boxes for their land, which I know you do great work in relation with?
Yeah, I'm happy to do this, and I'll just pull up my screen share really quick, and I'm not gonna like go through all of this. Um, but yeah, so I just want to get into this a little bit. So here's a kestrel. You guys see it, right? Yeah, okay. So just for everyone, because some of you may be familiar and others less so, but kestrels are falcons. They're really cool birds of prey. They're a small falcon. They're about the size of a blue jay, and they're our most colorful bird of prey in North America. So they're really extraordinary, super cool birds that need our help. So they've declined a lot, and we're trying to learn why they've declined, and we're also trying to help them along the way. So we have this project. Here's the declines. Yes, it's all very grim, um, but we have this project to put out bird boxes for kestrels because they are one of these species that can use birdhouses. They're cavity nesters. And so for kestrels to breed successfully during the summer, they need a big hollowed out cavity in a big dead tree that's out in some very open landscape. And so that is a limiting resource for them, very much so. And so what we've done in collaboration with many partners, including Columbia Land Conservancy, is build the boxes and get them out on the landscape. And so we partner with organic farmers, private landowners, land trusts, other nonprofits, town and state governments, etc., to put these boxes out in suitable open habitat. So kestrels need like 40 acres again of open habitat within the matrix around the box. So we always kind of look at that and assess where could be a good area. If people in Columbia County, Eastern Columbia County, are interested in hosting a box, they can reach out to me. I'm sure Mallory will follow up with my info. And I'm happy. And even if I can't get one to you, I'm happy to consult and provide some recommendations and things like that. But our Kestrel project has had a lot of success. We're in our fourth year. This year, we hit a benchmark. We fledged 103 Kestrels from our boxes in this year alone. And I believe 12 of those came from Columbia, or 8 of those this year came from Columbia Land Conservancy lands, including UMS and Overmountain as well. So yeah, it's a really cool project and also just rewarding because we see the tangible, immediate conservation results with Young of the Year leaving the boxes in numbers. So.
Fantastic, Ben. Thank you for going into that a little bit for us. I just put this in the chat as well, but everyone on the call, and even if you sign up and you don't make it, everyone receives a recording of the conversation tonight. And I'll include it'll be jam-packed with Ben and Heidi's contact information and then links to some of the resources discussed and their contacts as well. So we could just give a virtual round of applause to our speakers. Heidi and Ben, thank you so much for being with us tonight. It was really a fantastic way to start off the community conversations. And thank you all for joining us, taking some time on a Tuesday. I hope you have wonderful evenings. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.